having different people feeding into your life and helping guide you is so helpful. You can't do everything yourself, and you kind of just have to understand that. You've got to be able to take advice, take criticism, and just let people guide you along. I've learned more listening to podcasts than I learned in my 2 years of college.
Right now is a great opportunity to leverage the power of voice.
No one's going to be able to offer the world what you can.
It took someone else that had a bigger vision than me to be able to show me the way. And so now that we're here, we can show others the way. What if you can do what you love to fight what you hate?
Be on Air, powered by Podcast Farm. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. Today has been a jam-packed day full of amazing interviews, and I'm so excited for these all to drop. Today I have an extraordinary guest. Grace Walker is a 19-year-old real estate agent and an incredible podcast host with a passion for seeing others succeed. She has the dream to build a platform that encourages people to get rid of their limiting beliefs, be different from the crowd, and to realize their capabilities. We're going to get into some really interesting topics: education, podcasting, real estate, the future of what youth can accomplish in this world. And I'm really excited to dive in. So please stick around. Grace, thank you so much for making time and hopping on the air with us.
Yes, I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. We were chatting a little bit before you got on, and already getting into some really interesting topics. So I'm excited to dive in. And I was thinking about Simon Sinek, and he has this book called Start with the Why. And so I wanted to start with the why, if you're okay with that. I wanted to ask you, why do you do what you do? Why did you start a podcast? Why did you, you have an interesting trajectory with school and what you chose to do with your higher education. So could you tell us a little bit about your why?
Sure. So I think my why, so as you know, I'm very young. I'm 19. And so my why is pretty recent. I mean, within the last 4 or 5 years. And that's me being a very little baby, 14-year-old, 15-year-old Grace. But, starting out in middle school, I went to a little charter school. And when you're in kind of a sheltered environment like that, you feel a lot more comfortable kind of being yourself. You don't really need to conform to a cultural norm because you're kind of sheltered. That's how I was through all of middle school. So I was very outgoing, super involved in theater. I started a YouTube channel. I was already into all this social media stuff from the get-go. And then I went to a public high school, and that was definitely a culture shift for me. And I got bullied bad when I was a freshman. And look, I didn't really take it like, I wasn't crying or upset about it, but I kind of just took it as, apparently I'm weird. Like I need to fix that. No, I didn't. But at the time I believed that. And so I totally stopped doing all the stuff I was doing. I stopped doing YouTube. I stopped doing acting. I stopped doing all the stuff that I liked and made me that I cared about, which is kind of a bummer. And so for a few years, I just kind of conformed to that cultural norm of being like everybody else and doing what people approved of and just doing things for other people's approval. And then I graduated, and suddenly all the people I'd been working on the approval for were just gone. And I was like, wow, I should have listened to the people in my life, like my parents, my family, who said, like, you don't need to change for others, because it's true. Like 4 years fly by and then you never talk to them again. I can't even tell you more than probably 1 or 2 people I've spoken to since I graduated high school. And so about a year into, maybe even less, like maybe 6 months to a year into college, I realized I started to slowly go back to my roots and back to what I liked and enjoyed. And I started really using social media, especially with the pandemic starting and not being able to do anything live, really using social media to go back to my original me. So I immediately started doing the things I wanted to do again. I started trying to have a platform on TikTok, which if I had done that before in high school, of course you'd get made fun of. It's TikTok. But started doing that. And then I always wanted to have a TV show. So I started a podcast as kind of like an easy way to get into that. And I haven't actually started YouTube up again, but it's definitely like in the pipeline for me. I want to start doing that again. So my why for doing all of this is really to tell people, by doing what I want to do and not caring about what other people think, I want to encourage others to do the same. And that's where the name Beat the Culture came from. It's just being different, because that's okay. And it's something that I really struggled with for a while and totally changed myself for, and realized that was dumb. And I just don't want people to do the same. So I just want to start an encouraging platform and community to encourage people to reach their goals and not let other people get in the way of that.
Hearing you say that, I feel so inspired.
Thanks.
And yeah, so I mean, I definitely understand looking back and being like, oh, that wasn't the right decision. I don't think it's dumb at all. It makes sense with the pressure in school. And when I was coming up in middle and high school, we had flip phones with like grainy, I don't even, the cameras weren't really a feature of the phone. It was texting. And so we didn't have cyberbullying. We didn't have all this stuff that the newer generations are having to cope with. And it's unimaginable, just like the pressure. So it's understandable that we kind of try to conform to be accepted. We all want to be accepted, but it sounds like you returned to that inner inspiration and fire. And it's amazing. Like your social media game is crazy. It's so good. Your reels, your design, it's extraordinary. A lot of people can't create that content and put that level of content out. And it seems like you're doing everything yourself. Is that right?
Oh, it's so much work. It's actually so stressful. But yes, I am doing it all myself. And it's just so much to keep up with. And it's constantly changing. And I was literally laying in bed last night like social media is so overwhelming. But the whole goal that I have requires growing a following. So you kind of got to put in that work. But you're right. Like people don't realize I'm over here in my head like, okay, I need to post 3 reels a day, 3 TikToks a day, 1 Instagram post every other day. I need to join Clubhouse. I need to join Telegram. Like all these new social medias are constantly getting thrown at you, and then the algorithms change, and it's so much work. But yeah, here we are doing it all by myself and dying of stress, but it's working.
Hopefully you'll be able to get some VAs soon. So I know you're also a real estate agent. Would you talk a little bit about your transition out of school and how you came into real estate?
Yeah. So it's kind of a funny story. So my plan originally was I wanted to be like everyone else, and I wanted to go straight to a 4-year college. That was kind of a common theme for me. It's just I wanted to do everything everyone else was doing. But my parents quickly shot down that idea because of finances. They were like, no, you don't need to take out student loans, and you should go to a community college. And I threw a fit, but eventually I did that. And I'm so grateful now that I did that because I'm super into finances now, and I would have been super mad if I had student loans. So I'm very grateful that they convinced me to go to the CC locally. So I went ahead and I was getting my degree at the local community college. Meanwhile, I was working at In-N-Out actually. And I worked a lot there. Like it's really hard to get full-time, but you can get part-time with very close to full-time hours. So I was working a lot of hours there. I was working 6 days a week, 6 hours a day for like a year straight while being a full-time college student and graduating early. So it was just constantly like head down, grinding, getting things done, saving money, and working hard. And my plan was to do that for the next 4 years, but then to eventually transfer. Wasn't too sure where yet. But I got to a point where I was just not taking time for myself at all or enjoying anything. I was just constantly work. There was no rest. There was no breathing. It was just stressful. And again, like I said, I'm really into saving money. And so I wouldn't spend any money on myself, but almost to an unhealthy point. So one day I just had enough and I had like a mental breakdown. And I was like, I'm getting a sandwich. So I took myself to get a sandwich at Submarina, which is the sandwich shop locally. And for me, that's a big deal because I don't spend money on food. I try not to. So this was a big change, buying a sandwich. I get there and my uncle was there for some reason. And I was like, hey, and he was eating on his break, I guess. He had gone to the same spot. So I sat with him and I was just kind of venting, like, I'm so overwhelmed. Like, I do not like working this much. I don't like I'm not doing anything I enjoy. I just feel like I'm just working. It's too much. And so he was like, oh, you should work for Susan, which is my aunt. He was like, it's easy. All you have to do is make phone calls. You can get like 4,000 or 5,000 a month. And I was making like 1,000 a month. So I was like, what? For phone calls? Sign me up. So I met with my aunt and she's like, oh yeah, well, you have to be a licensed real estate agent to do that. And so it still didn't click to me that it was going to be a lot more than phone calls. So I was just like, okay, sure. Got my real estate license. So it was, again, another few months of work because I was still full-time college, still working a ton of In-N-Out. I took a little bit of time off so I could have time to study for real estate and do all of that schooling as well. But I got my real estate license at the same almost the same time as I got my associate's degree. And then I went to meet with my aunt. I was like, here's my license. I'm ready. And she was like, okay. And then the first meeting we had, she was like, so we need to talk about college, because you can go to college, but I don't want you to like move off to college when I'm sitting here training you, which completely makes sense. She needed to take a lot of time training me up to be a good agent and things like that. But I just had not assumed that I would have to make the choice. And I don't think I necessarily had to make the choice, because if I wanted to, I could get my bachelor's and just maybe do it online or do it locally while being an agent. But I did kind of have dreams of moving off to college. So it was kind of like, oh, now I have to choose. And I just did all this work to get my real estate license. Like, what should I do? So I thought about it a lot, and I decided that I just thought really about my future, my real goal in life. And it wasn't necessarily anything that needed a bachelor's degree. But the thought of that really freaked me out, because everybody is convinced that you need a bachelor's degree to succeed, and me being one of them. So it was almost like I wasn't worried about not having my bachelor's because it wouldn't let me succeed. Like, it wasn't that, but I was more worried about, if I don't get my bachelor's, people won't believe that I will succeed. It was, again, that thought of, I need to please everybody else. Like, everyone's going to think this. And then I immediately slapped that thought out of my head and was like, it's fine. Let's just do this. I'm already a semester ahead in college. Let's take a semester and just do real estate and focus on my public speaking career. Let's see where that goes. Let's see if I need a bachelor's. And lo and behold, never went back yet. We'll see. But for now, it's not in the pipeline. And I'm doing fairly well. I'm on my aunt's team, Susan Johnson and Associates real estate team, with eXp Realty, and I'm loving it. And then meanwhile, I'm starting a podcast and doing all this public speaking, and it's a great balance.
That is such a exciting and eye-opening story for anyone listening, especially anyone who's still in school. And I hope that this show becomes, more accessible to younger folk, because I want it to support them in their educational journey and expanding possibility, right? And I love that you got your associates. You had some of the sort of core studies that everyone can benefit from, but then you went into a trade and you started to earn instead of going into debt, and that is just so powerful. And we're both huge fans of Dave Ramsey, which I hope we'll geek out on in a little bit here. But I want to back up a little bit to this public speaking, and so in your bio that you sent me, you were talking about how you were always interested in public speaking. And I think that is one of the things that's probably allowed you to excel, not only in podcasting, but even in real estate. So how did you get into public speaking? And if you could, let's talk a little bit about some action items or tangible tips that people could implement, myself included. I'm asking you how to become a better public speaker.
Okay. So I grew up around public speaking. So obviously, my aunt, she lives right 10 minutes from me, and I've grown up around her being a real estate agent. So she's just always been a public speaker and educator. She speaks out. So I've had that influence. But also, my dad actually is a huge public speaker. My parents both together own a record label events company in Southern California. And so I've grown up around him producing concerts and events that are pretty good sized events. And he would always go up and speak, and just kind of from a little age, like from probably when I could speak, he would bring me up with him. Like, he would bring me up to do little things like, hey, Grace, why don't you announce the winner of the raffle? I'd go up and be like, there's a mic right here. I don't know why I did that.
Second one.
I know what. But so having my aunt and my dad both in my life from a young age was huge. Probably more so, my aunt came in a little bit later now that we're getting a lot closer. But my dad, especially, like, from a young age, would always have me public speak. And along with that came singing and performing. And I think that having that background definitely helps you to grow confidence being in front of a crowd. So just speaking at my parents' concerts, I started performing. I would be the opening act, like singing for different concerts for a lot of them as a kid and into my teenage years as well. And then that's kind of where it came from. And then again, I did a lot of musical theater as we got through middle school, and I would say kind of just being exposed to a public setting got me here.
Those are tips. I mean, it definitely
Yeah.
sounds like practice makes perfect, and having
For sure.
encouraging support. But yeah, I'd be curious some tips for the listeners.
Some tips. Well, I think one thing that I struggled with a lot for a while was I talk fast and I would forget to enunciate. So sometimes I'd go up and I'd be like, "Blah, blah, blah, blah," and everyone would be like, "What?" So if anyone else has that problem, definitely just really working on slowing down and practicing beforehand. You might not necessarily need a script, but if you write down some bullet points of what you're going to be talking about, and you kind of just memorize the general concept of what you're speaking of and you're confident in what you're saying, things tend to come out a lot more smooth. So I am one of those people who I enjoy the instant gratification of like, I don't need to prep, I can just wing this. But sometimes you kind of got to put your pride aside and realize, no, I need a prep. No matter how good you are, preparation is everything. So even me, just like, or any of you, just having those bullet points and doing a little bit of prep before you go out to speak is super, super beneficial when it comes to actually getting the words out of your mouth.
And the slowing down piece is really important in probably every area of our life. I think I was just speaking with a guest in a previous interview, and we were talking about slowing down to speed up and how we can do or say a lot of words, but if we can slow down and get quiet or still, then some really powerful things can happen. I think with speech, especially if we can create these dynamic kind of flowing stories or with our tone and everything, then that is going to be way more engaging for the audience, as well as they'll actually be able to understand what we're saying. So fast forward now, you have this wonderful podcast where you're talking about all things mindset and self-empowerment and actualization. And what would you recommend to this, let's say the middle schoolers and the high schoolers right now? If you could speak to 1,000 of them, what would you tell them?
Oh gosh. The main thing, and I cannot stress this enough, is don't worry about what other people think. That was my biggest obstacle. Still is. I still deal with it, but that's just been my biggest obstacle in life. I'm convinced that like my success could be even higher now if I had just not been so caught up in the idea of being a people pleaser and worrying so much about what others thought. So that is probably where I would go with that. My main thing is just you do you. Like, who cares? Be confident in what you can do, because those people are just so irrelevant. So that is the main message I'd want to get across to them.
Yeah, and in the marketing world, in the business world, that becomes your greatest value and your greatest differentiating factor that will actually get you clients, or the idea of niche down, and what makes you different. What's your value proposition? Like, why would someone work with you versus someone else? And it is our own uniqueness that will empower us to create immense impact in our communities and in our work. Right. So that is such amazing advice for everyone. And it's hard, it's challenging, right? It can be easier said than done, especially if you're around a lot of peer pressure. And so I've always found that surrounding yourself with people who lift you up is key. Association is everything. Right. So if you can have a circle of friends or mentors around you that support you as you are, and challenge you to grow, but support you in all your quirks and all your uniqueness, then that really is such a huge support system.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And what you said about having a mentor too is huge. I have realized over the past probably year or so that I really do enjoy talking to people who are older than me, almost more than I enjoy talking to people my age. And that has nothing to do with anybody my age. And some of you I love talking to. It's not that, but it's just hearing people with more experience and having them really help shepherd in your life is so useful. And I'm very plugged into my church here in my hometown. And so it's called discipleship in church, but having those disciples around you is so important. And I don't know if you're religious or anything, but a Bible verse that always pops into my head is Proverbs 11:14. And that is, it basically just says that a multitude of counselors, their safety. And I completely agree with that, because I just think that having different people feeding into your life and helping guide you is so helpful. You can't do everything yourself, and you kind of just have to understand that. You've got to be able to take advice, take criticism, and just let people guide you along.
Oh, I thank you so much for bringing in some soul food into this. I love that. You'll have to send that to me later so that I can meditate on that. But I agree 100% having mentors. I love speaking with my elders and my guides, and I owe them everything. A shout out to Raven Blair Glover, the talk show maven. She has been really helping me with developing my podcast, and she recommended StreamYard to me, actually, which is what we are recording this on. And so, yeah, with the guidance of elders, we can get so much. And I will say this, I'm really enjoying speaking with younger folks like you, because you bring such a incredible like enthusiasm and unique way of seeing this situation that we're all in, and just so much creativity. And you know, every generation has its own gifts to bring, and so I think that connecting us all together is really key. And so this is inspiring to get to talk to you about this. And so you know okay, so we were talking a little bit about Dave Ramsey earlier. I would love to talk a little bit about the financial piece, because you know, you can have a good support system, you can have good mentors, you can be yourself, but it's like, if you can't put food on the table, then what do you do? So could you talk to us a little bit about what is budgeting, and why should we even think about that?
Yes. So I am so thankful that I found Dave Ramsey as a little child. I found him when I was 17, and I'm so grateful for that, because no matter where you find financial advice in life, it's beneficial. But I'm very fortunate to have found it kind of before I had to deal with it. So I kind of went into the financial world with a good head on my shoulders, a good idea of what I wanted to do. Good idea, not perfect idea. Let's get that straight, because again, I knew that number one, well, technically number three. So Dave Ramsey's baby steps. Number one is save aside $1,000 emergency fund. Number two is pay off your debt. And number three is set aside a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. And so for me, I never had debt. So I kind of just like started out at step number 3, saving up that 3 to 6 months. And so I was going for that. And whenever I got paid in and out, I would put a good like 75-80% of my check into my savings. And I had the ability to do that because, of course, at the time I was, and still am, a young adult, and I still lived with my parents. I didn't have expenses, so I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. But what I would do with the rest of it is I would just kind of like spend it. It was spending money. I didn't know where it was going. And so that didn't cause too many problems until my expenses kind of started happening a little bit more. I started having to pay for my own car. I bought my own car. I started having to pay for gas. I started having to pay for food, groceries, all things like kind of started that I had to pay for now, instead of just paying for fun things and saving money, got a little bit more real. And I remember like the pivotal moment when I realized, I need a budget, was when I went to go fill up my car with gas. And I didn't have any money for it. Now, granted, I had money for it, but it was in my savings account. And I'm very strict where it's like, don't take out of your savings. So it was just like, there was nothing in my checking account, only enough for a little bit. And I remember being like, well, that's a bummer. And so then I just kind of kept driving on empty. And then I parked at my house and my car was on fumes. And I went out the next morning to start my car, and my car wouldn't start. And I was like, why is my car not starting? Lo and behold, apparently you need gas in the car for the car to start. What? I don't know why I didn't know that. I just assumed like gas makes the car run, right? Makes sense. But I didn't know you needed gas to actually get the engine started. This is why I'm still 19. I'm still learning this stuff. But yeah, so when my car didn't start that morning, I was like, you know what? I had enough money to go out to eat this month, but not enough money to get my car to start. So we obviously need to get our priorities in line. And so that's when I really started getting into budgeting and just being intentional with your money, because my intention with my money was spend this aspect, save this aspect. And that's not that intentional. I needed to be more direct. And so that's when I got Dave Ramsey's app, which you might be familiar with. It's called Every Dollar. And it's a great app for budgeting because you have to manually put in when you spend money and where it goes. You plan it for the month. And then as the month goes on, you put it in, like, let's say I spent $10 today. I put that in the app. where I spent it. And then it will tell you how much is remaining, blah, 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 blah. And it helps get you on track and really know where your money's going. So you're not going to run into any of the issues like me and my car not starting, for example. But yeah, budgeting is super, super important. And I'm so glad that I am finally starting to realize that and figure it out.
Yeah. And a lot of financial, a lot of the impact, if we want to change our financial situation, so much of it is behavior. And Dave talks about this all the time. It's not about the job you get or what you do. I mean, obviously those things affect it, but it's the behavior. If you don't spend money, you save money. The quickest way to save and build wealth is to not spend money, right? And so the budgeting thing's interesting. I use an app called YNAB, YNAB. You need a budget.
Oh,
and
okay.
it's a similar app as Dave's. And I have it set to auto import everything, which removes me from the mindful practice of taking money out of my budget categories. And therefore I'm always like overspending in budgets and rebalancing. And so I think it's important to have that relationship with the money going in and out. And, Dave talks about how cash hurts when you pay, but this little plastic card is so different than money. It's like not an issue to just swipe, no problem. And then your bank account's empty. And so that's a huge thing. And not a lot of people actually do the budgeting practice. So I think that's a really cool feature of what you're doing. And then on top of that, obviously you're doing real estate, you're doing all this stuff. So you're really showing how you can build wealth. And I wanted to comment that, in the circumstances where we can save money by living with family, it's great. And that is how generational wealth kind of works, is like we have these resources that we can give to our kids and they can give to their kids. And so I think that's really an amazing thing that you're able to save and kind of give yourself a foundation. It puts you in such a great place.
I mean, it's definitely kind of like a pull, because obviously there's the part of me who's like, wow, I kind of have like my professional career going on and I'm really trying to start something and I still live at home. So it's like kind of a double life. Like I was telling you beforehand, it's like I go to work and I'm being super like adult. I'm selling houses. That's very adult. And then I come home, I'm like, Mom, what's for dinner? Did you do laundry? I'm just kidding. I do my own laundry. But you know what? You get the deal. So it's very, very much a double life. And so there's a part of me that's like, I should be moved out. Like I'm living like an adult. I should really be living like an adult. But then there's the other part of me that's like, okay, but you have this opportunity to save so much and prepare yourself. So that's why I have not moved out yet. It's been a couple years since I graduated high school. And I don't, at least personally right now, have an opinion on when people should move out. It's all different circumstantially for everybody. But I think for me, it'll definitely be soon, just because I'm getting to that point where financially I can still budget out rent while continuing to save, which is great. But in the meantime, like living at your parents' house or living with relatives, family, friends, that's okay. And it was hard for me to get that for a while. It was very almost draining.
I think it's a cultural thing, because so I've been to India several times, and it's a lot of folks have a multi-generational family. They have the grandparents there, they have the parents there, they have the kids there, maybe the grandchildren there. And it's so I think, you're talking about beat the culture. It's like, it is a cultural norm in the West. It's like, oh no, you need to move out and go be independent. But what does that do? That I'm not saying that's bad or not correct at all, but if we break the family system apart, then it's so much harder to succeed, and we can succeed more in community, whether it's blood family or just your soul family. And so I think that I don't personally see anything wrong with it. As long as you're happy, they're happy, and everything's flowing, then the more it makes sense to me. So okay, let's zoom out here, and I wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit on what you see the future of education kind of turning into, and you kind of like brainstorm with you. I've been in all these clubhouse rooms on like edutech and the, how to keep students engaged. And I believe in podcasting. I believe that podcasting is actually, we're talking about mentors. We're talking about like, allowing kids to explore their own interests. And I think that if you do a podcast, you do all that, plus you learn all these amazing skills. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that, and also what you see sort of working from your days in school and what you would like to see happen in the future.
Well, this is a personal opinion, but at least in my opinion, I think that I've learned more listening to podcasts than I learned in my 2 years of college.
Wow.
I'm 100% convinced. I mean, when I start talking about facts that I've learned about things that I'm confident discussing, topics like finance, topics like real estate, I've learned that all through experience, podcasts, YouTube videos. I didn't really learn that through school. I did go to real estate school to take the exam, but I could probably tell you one fact that I learned on the exam that I still remember. It wasn't the exam that was important. It was the experience and the real, like, hands-on aspects of real estate that taught me things about real estate. And it's been listening to podcasts, listening to Dave Ramsey has taught me so much about finance. I'm convinced that I could give up and give an entire spiel about finance now. And I didn't learn any of that in school. And I don't want to say that to talk down on school, because I think that education is powerful no matter where it comes from. But I think that message really needs to be normalized, because people are so convinced that they need college. Without college, you're not educated. And that's not true. Self-education is huge. Reading, podcasts, experience, all are education just as much as the university. And if you're going into like the medical field, go to college, please. I don't want anybody who hasn't been to college to be operating on me, please.
Just because they listen to a podcast.
I listen to a podcast about giving open heart surgery. I'm fine.
That's a good point.
No, that's, of course, college is great for a career field like that, for example. But if you want to go on to be a public speaker or a real estate agent, in my case, you don't need school for that. I mean, I feel like I'm a prime example. I'm doing very well, and I didn't go get that bachelor's degree. And so it's just kind of like, I don't like the idea that college is normalized to the point where people who don't go to college are looked down upon. Like, I've even had that happen with me, where someone's like, oh, what are you doing now? And I get kind of nervous. Like, sorry, not what are you doing now, but like if someone asks me, oh, where are you going to school? I kind of like get anxious to respond. I'm like, ugh, I'm not in school. And I feel shameful almost. And then I have to go on to justify that with, but I am doing A, B, and C to justify the fact that I'm not going to college. And I just don't know why that's a thing. It needs to be fixed, because it's true. Just like you said, there's so much power in education beyond the classroom, and we need to normalize it. That's how I feel.
Snaps. Yes. Okay.
Woo.
So the first thing, grow on, should be a thing, I think, right? That's a great
Right?
term. Grow on. Grow on.
Now a new idea.
Yeah, new idea.
Grow on.
I think it's interesting, the point you made about listening to podcasts as a way to fill in some gaps. So because I'd always been thinking about this as students starting a podcast and how that would help them, but them listening to podcasts, that like fills out this whole other thing. That's how you can get those hours in. Because I think the problem with that other idea is like, well, you know, how do you get those credit hours, right? Like, you do have to log time with subject to have it, and you have to engage with it. And I think the engagement piece is where the interviewing is really powerful, because you have to engage with the content. You have to see what your guests have talked about, what they haven't talked about, what you want to ask about. So there's a lot of self-reflection in it.
Yeah.
And it teaches emotional intelligence skills, how to communicate, how to like, listen really well, public speaking, all that stuff. But yes, so listening to shows is a super powerful way to learn. And so what do you think, like, what did you see in school that is working?
That is working?
Really well.
All right. So what I did learn from school is, it's kind of hard now with COVID. Schools aren't really in person, but the in-person experience that I got through school is what helped me. And I know everyone learns differently, but I do learn better from doing, not just being there. I don't know if that makes sense. So for example, I got my associates in communications because speaking, and so I had a few communications classes where we'd have assignments to work with other people to go on to create a speech about such and such a thing. And I think school was really beneficial for me because it gave me the opportunity to work with others. And like podcasting, I can listen to a podcast and that's just me listening to someone else. But at least with that school aspect, so on the contrary of my opinion, where school does maybe work better, is I got the opportunity to work with other students, to hear other people's ideas, get to know different personality traits, and just a lot of getting to know different people and not just working just alone, but working in a group. I think group assignments really helped me in that way.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. The collaborative piece is huge. The social aspect is huge. I don't think that the digital space can perfectly replace that. However, so I was a teacher in middle school. I did after school programs teaching electronic music and podcasting, actually.
Wow.
And it seemed like a lot of the kids would just go home separately and play video games together. Like that was actually the way that they hung out anyway, that there was like a decline in actually going over and having play dates and stuff. And so in that way, I think that podcasting is a great, and streaming is a great way to socialize, and you can do collaborative projects together. Like I'll just give a little tiny example. This morning, I was invited to mod a coaches connection room on Clubhouse, a networking room in the morning. It's every Tuesday at 7:30. And just the planning of it and how are we going to mod it? What's the format? What's the timing? And just being in a room with these 5 other incredible women who were leading and sharing ideas and brainstorming collaboration, what that teaches is so important. And I felt a little bit of that coming back from when I was in college, and when I got to collaborate with people, I felt that same feeling of like, oh, this is a school project we're all working on. So I think that it can at least give us some percentage of that experience again, even though we're not in person.
Yes. And like I said, I am pretty new to the podcasting world. So I suppose maybe I'll get experience like that hopefully soon. But yeah, that makes sense. I definitely think being able to be collaborative and work with other people is a huge skill that you need to have. And that's why it really is a bummer seeing all this online school, because it's just kind of like taking away that. I feel like at least I don't know. I'm just hearing from my brother's experience. My brother's over in Zoom class across the room right now, but you know what I mean? I just feel like working with other people is really important for sure. I said, just no matter where you get it from, it's just an important life skill for sure.
Yes. And that point, I heard that a statistic that like almost a third of students just kind of dropped off the map. They didn't show up for Zoom, all this stuff. And so, it would be interesting for you to ask your bro about this. Like, what if he, like, is he at all interested in podcasting? Does he see what you're doing? And is he like, oh yeah, I could imagine that? Or is it like, I
don't know. He's very much an athlete. So not really into like the whole artistic type stuff that I'm into. So
what if he could interview like the athletes that are most inspiring to him?
Ooh, he really likes Lionel Messi.
Like if he could speak with him, wouldn't that?
If he could speak with them? Oh, he'd probably love that.
so then we're talking about the counsel, their safety and counsel, that verse that you read or recited. That's where that's exciting. So every student come up with their own track and their own plan and their own heroes that they want to reach, and it's kind of like a quest. They need to go find their guides. They need to go find the heroes of their story to learn from.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. I need to go pick his brain now.
Yeah, that'd be awesome if you could do a little bit of research and development. Okay, so as we're winding down, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about social media strategy, because there's a huge range of people coming into the space right now. Not everyone likes social media. Not everyone wants to be on social media. I kind of wanted to pick your brain about Instagram, TikTok, how you're using it with your podcast, what you found to work, any tips that you have to share with the community.
Yeah. So what's tough about social media is the fact that the algorithm is always changing. So right when you think you figured it out, there's a change. So it's definitely been a lot of trial and error for me. TikTok was more of a joke at first, to be honest. I would just kind of make like funny videos. It was just, I didn't have anyone I knew on there. So I was like, whatever, like, I don't really care what I do. I would just make random videos. And then one day, one of them blew up. It blew up being like 400,000 views, which is blowing up for me. And I gained like 8,000 followers. I went from like 0 to 8,000. And that was a lot for me. So I was like, whoa, I'm going to do it more. So I just started doing it more. And a few of the tips I've realized through a lot of growth since that video to now, I a lot of times would make my videos about me and what I'm doing, and those don't blow up the way I wanted them to. I'd be like, hi, I'm Grace and I'm doing a podcast. And everyone's like, next. Sad, but it's true. You need to make what you're posting be about them. Because if you pull them in, if you like, instead of saying, hi, I'm Grace and I'm doing a podcast about finance, and you start out saying, are you struggling with finances? They're going to be like, wait, yeah, I am. And they'll listen. So you could do the same video idea as you had, but you need to flip it and make it seem beneficial to your audience. And that's what I've noticed are the videos that blow up. I a lot of times will start in my reels and TikToks with a question that is a common question, and then people will want to know the answer, so they'll stay around to finish the video. And the reason I have also been focusing on reels and TikToks is because TikTok on its own, that's all there is videos. And TikTok's algorithm is just a lot easier, in my opinion, to get followers on, because people on Instagram most of the time see who they're following. They don't see a lot of new people yet. I'll get into how they do, but a lot of time, like, your Instagram feed's all mostly just people you follow. But on TikTok, your For You page is very rarely people you follow. It's people who are posting things that you're interested in. So even though you start out on TikTok with 0 followers and you post a video about finance, if that video starts to gain traction, anybody who's interested in finance is going to see that video on their For You page. They don't have to be following to see it. So it's just a lot easier to get your content out there. And that's why I like that platform, because you don't have to feel like you're inferior because you have a small following. You can kind of get out there regardless. And then Instagram kind of saw that everybody started moving towards TikTok and away from Instagram because it was easier to blow up on TikTok. So that's when Instagram produced Reels, which are basically TikToks, but on Instagram. And so now that the Reels are in effect on Instagram, they're doing the same thing. You're not going to see Reels of people you follow. Well, you will, but you're not only going to see Reels of people you follow. You're going to see Reels that pertain to your interests. So it's just a lot easier with those two platforms, in my opinion, to get seen and grow your following. So that is one thing that I kind of just like really centered in on, over those two platforms because of that reason. And also, like, consistency is huge, because I would, at the beginning of my TikTok career, I would post one video and just be like, all right, when's it going to blow up? And then it wouldn't. And I'd be like, what the heck? But then once I started posting 2-3 times a day consistently for months, I started blowing up a lot more. And it's because I was being consistent. The algorithm realized I was being consistent. It was like, this person wants to be noticed. We're going to push out the video. Your chances of getting a video pushed out, if you're posting one video, are a lot smaller than if you're posting 20 videos. Your chances are higher. So consistency, making your video about you, and then really centering in on platforms where it's easiest to grow are my 3 biggest tips.
Those are some amazing, amazing tips. And the piece about focusing on the viewer or the listener, that piece of advice scales across like every aspect of marketing and sales and business, like copywriting. Everything needs to be framed in the problem that you're solving for them, or how it involves them, or why it matters to them. And so that is huge. And then all the strategies you shared, really valuable. I also have been experiencing a little bit of the nothing like 400,000, but Reels, just for whatever reason, they reach more. And also I think that the attention span of it being 30. So I've been playing around with how can you promote your podcast in 30 seconds? So if you can just take the best clips of the episode or the best soundbite and make it into a reel and somehow frame it towards the viewer, then I think that's probably going to go farther than even the 1 minute like story feed posts, you know? So
it's true. Very true. Yeah. Agreed. And I mean, once you get that, the audience's attention, so let's say you get them because of a reel, I don't want to underestimate the power of your story and your feed, because once you've got their attention, you want to keep their attention. So once they finally follow you because of a reel that might have blown up and caught their attention, if they click on your profile and then there's nothing else for them besides that reel, they're probably not going to be that interested and want to stay. So I still do like to focus on my feed and consistently posting content that is beneficial to my audience on my feed and my story, because once I get them, like, the reel's kind of how you reel them in. Oh, maybe that's why they named them that. Wow, creative Instagram. Yeah. Once you reel them in, you want them to stay. So that's kind of where I feel like your feed and your story come into play and being relevant.
Yeah, I think about it like composting, actually. So Podcast Farm, I like to come up with podcast and agriculture analogies. But in composting and in permaculture, sustainable agriculture, soil is everything. And the way that you build soil is through wood and carbon and nitrogen. So you need carbon-based like leaf and wood material, and you need grass and manure and food scraps that are high nitrogen, and you mix them together and make soil. But the nitrogen stuff burns up really fast and decomposes, and the wood stuff takes longer. And so what people often do when they dig a big garden bed is they'll like put stumps in the bottom and branches. Then they'll put leaves, and then they'll put soil, and then they'll put the green stuff, and then mix it. And that wood is long-term food. It's long-term soil nutrient and decomposition material. And so similarly, what I'm hearing from you about the feed and stuff is like the reels reel them in, the TikToks reel them in, but you need to nourish them. And that's why I think the podcast is also like that. The podcast is this, okay, now are you ready to feast? Are you ready to get like real, because 30 seconds, you can only share so much. A minute, you can only share so much. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. It's true. I always question it because I'm still, like I said, figuring out the whole social media thing. Like, I feel like I kind of have a grasp, but it's constantly changing and evolving, and I'm still at the beginning of my journey in the social media world. But I wonder, like, how do some of these big influencers keep their audience engaged? Because they're only posting that stuff. And I'm like, what? Like, if I was a big influencer, I'd want to be dragging them to my podcast, dragging them to something bigger. So I do kind of wonder, like, what do you think? Like, how do you think they do that? Do you think it's just the algorithm? Because not every influencer has a platform like a podcast or a TV show. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I've actually heard that a lot of influencers aren't doing so well. They have the social capital, but they don't have the business behind it. Not all influencers. Obviously, influencer marketing is huge, but let's put it this way: if you're only advertising other people's products and services, what do you have to invest in? And that, so you're investing in your platform, you're investing in your brand. You're also a real estate investor. Like, that's really intelligent. And I would say, I tell people this a lot. Like, as of this, I'll just be super transparent. As of this recording, March 23rd, 11:48 a.m., I'm just about to hit 1,000 downloads on my podcast. And it's 3. Woo! Got to celebrate everything. You know, that's not a huge number. That's not a big number in podcast land.
That's great.
Well, here's the thing. Do you want 10,000 downloads and no conversion and no engagement? Or do you want a couple hundred downloads and sales and inspiration and connection? And I've been able to monetize at least like 10 grand so far in 3 months because of the show, because of what it's gotten. So I always counsel people to just focus on quality, focus on service to the community. And obviously numbers matter for many different reasons, even if it's just psychological goal setting, but the importance of investing in our own platforms. As far as those influencers, I'm not sure exactly, there's a lot of great examples of how that works, but I would say that you want to have your own products and services so that you are a little bit more self-sustained.
That's okay. We're going to be influencers next, so we'll change the game for them once we're up there, right?
Micro influencers is a whole other thing too, right? Like, not going to the huge reach people, but going to the middle and lower end of the influencers. For podcasters, you can kind of build some collaboration possibility there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Grace, as we're getting down to the end of this wonderful interview, you shared so much value, and I know that the audience is going to get a lot out of this. Where could they tune in, and how can they connect with you? And any last words to share with them?
Last words is thank you so much for watching. And then if you guys want to tune in to me, like we mentioned, my TikTok and Instagram are my main social media platforms for now. So if you want to follow me on there, my personal is at Grace Walker with 2 A's in Grace. So GRAACE Walker. Bummer that Grace Walker cannot give me the name, but it's okay. We're working with what we got. And then my business one is at Beat the Culture. And I post very consistently on all those platforms if you guys want to keep up. But then obviously the main place I want you guys to head is to my podcast. So Beat the Culture is on all platforms you can find podcasts: Apple Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever you name it. There it is. There it is. And if you guys want to tune in, I'm super new. And so I am open to talking about whatever, but it always ties down to the fact that it's different than the culture. We talk finances, we talk career, we talk success, just self-improvement in general is my thing that I like to talk about. And so, if you guys want to tune into that, that is where you can find me. And I would love to see you there.
Yeah, you will not regret it. She has some of the most hilarious TikTok reel, just awesome content, and also really useful self-development.
Thank you.
Just not, its content makes it sound so, small. It's more than that. You really great info, really great conversations on your podcast. Go check out Sister Grace. She's working on some amazing stuff. Grace, thank you so much for joining. And I hope to have you back on the show in a little bit so we can see how your media empire has grown. And you'll probably have a TV show by then, right?
I'd love to. Yes, TV show coming soon. Not really, but hopefully eventually.
All right. Well, take care. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Be On Air. I hope you enjoyed it and are now one step closer to turning on your mic and broadcasting your message to the world. Are you ready to start your own podcast and amplify your brand? Or are you struggling to get your show in front of engaged audiences? I can help you on your broadcasting journey. Get in touch with me and apply for a strategy session if you want to discuss your podcast idea. You can reach me at www.podcast-farm.com. I'm on all the social media. Until next time, my friends, I'm K.Lee Marks. Thanks for tuning in to Be On Air.